All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Matt, one of our other trainers, says the screen's looking a little strange for him. Is everyone else seeing the PowerPoint? Can anyone maybe just confirm in the chat that they're seeing the PowerPoint okay? Full screen. Sweet. Thanks, Scott. Matt, I'm not sure. It might be your computer on that end, or maybe whatever I did fixed it. Awesome. Okay. Well, let's jump right in. Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Troy Daniels, technical trainer here at SimpliPhi Power. So today we're going to be doing a little bit of a new presentation talking about really kind of focusing on backup, and maybe, that might be related to critical loads or whole home backup, but that is kind of where we're at as far as, Parker, I see your comments, you don't have to keep making them, or I'm good to go. Thank you though. And we're going to just be talking through this and kind of, what SimpliPhi offers for this. And actually, I've got some slides that were given to me by Lumen, if you're familiar with that company. And we will be able to discuss them in a little bit more detail as well, and how that all kind of ties together, which, if you've been kind of keeping up on things, a lot of big changes have been kind of happening where, residential is kind of moving towards that smart, I don't want to say smart home. I don't like that phrase, smart panel type solution. Definitely as an installer, I think there's a huge benefit. So just to get started, some housekeeping stuff. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, go up to the Q&A bar, type in your questions right there. If you are part of our IQ newsletter, or if you're not, I would sign up now. Matt Walker and I's first podcast is actually going to be, first podcast episode will be coming out, I think in the next couple of days, or maybe even today. We're going to be talking about wind energy a little bit and some considerations there. So if you're not signed up, go ahead and email me at training@simpliphipower.com, or just check us out on the website. You can sign up there. All right, let's hop right in. So I'll do my usual company history and overview slides. I think it's always important just to kind of get through those and really talk about where the company is, where we're going. For those that might already know, we actually started as OES Energy. OES Energy was the original name of the company in 2010. And really what we were looking to do was find a lithium chemistry, or really just a solution, you could call it, to a problem that we saw, which was unsafe lithium chemistries and lead acid batteries. What we found was lithium iron phosphate. This is where we grew our company around this chemistry, being safe, reliable, clean. And we actually were able to kind of demonstrate that with the Department of Defense, 2011, 2012. This is where we were able to actually take our lithium iron phosphate, put them out in the field. At the time, the military was actually saying, interestingly enough, no lithium batteries whatsoever. We were able to convince them that the lithium iron phosphate does not have the same thermal runaway problems that the other lithium batteries experience. Happy to say no failures in that project at all. And even in the harsher conditions, those batteries held up. From there, we've been continuing to expand our product line, relaunched as SimpliPhi Power, and actually have continued to kind of grow around this idea of easy turnkey solutions, as well as kind of off-the-shelf stuff for every project, and really looking at how distributed assets play a big part. From there, we've even gone towards larger assets. So looking at commercial level stuff, we do offer those products as well now. And we continue to grow as a company, even in manufacturing. We actually manufacture in California, and we've continued to grow our facility and our manufacturing line. So safe, proven, simple technology, as I mentioned, non-toxic, non-hazardous, cobalt-free. This is where, I'll talk about it in the slide coming up here, but this is where we do not have that risk of thermal runaway. UL certifications, 1642, 1973, and 9540A on certain products, which is definitely going to become the standard here more and more. 9540. 9540A being the test protocol, we're going through that as well. We have over a decade of experience, deployed in over 40 countries, well over 100 megawatt hours installed worldwide, tested and validated by the US Army and Marine Corps. We even have special permission to fly our batteries from the FAA due to the chemistry. They are, again, manufactured in the United States. We do manufacture right in Oxnard, California. That's where these batteries are being manufactured. So a lot of companies these days will maybe have an office in the US and just simply white label a battery coming in from overseas. That is not the case with us. We have manufacturing line and manufacturing workers here in the US. Simple solutions, again, we're looking at how to move towards ESS, energy storage solutions, all-in-one type situations that really kind of help on the installer side more than anything, and the kind of ease of access when it comes to putting these units in. So again, chemistry-wise, we stick to lithium iron phosphate. We're looking at other chemistries, typically cobalt. Apologize, it's a little fuzzy. It looks like a little pixelated there on the screen, or maybe it's just my oversized monitor here. But cobalt-based chemistries, you can see, have that prone to thermal runaway. They're toxic. They involve abusive mining practices to get the cobalt, ventilation requirements, cooling requirements. These are all systems that are points of failure. And we just don't have that issue with lithium iron phosphate, which is no chance of thermal runaway, non-toxic, and that kind of cuts out this need for ventilation and cooling and all of this redundant equipment. So again, lithium iron phosphate. And if you're curious, we currently use a cylindrical form factor when it comes to the cells within the battery. Okay, so I'm just going to go through these products real quick. These are the products that are going to be relevant to this presentation. Specifically, we do have other products that I'm not going to mention, but for this presentation, we're going to go through these are really the relevant ones. The standard PHI 3.8 comes in 24 and 48 volt. This is our most popular battery still. It's a simple battery. It's parallel connections only. It is modular and scalable, meaning you can have as many of these as you want in parallel. I've seen some pretty large systems, 80, 90 battery systems where we really can build up that storage. They're meant to be small building blocks that are easy to work with and you can expand on. Does have an integrated battery management system. However, that battery management system is only internal. So it only talks really to its own battery. It's not communicating with the inverter or the other batteries, which is, again, a simpler design that we go for, where you don't have a bunch of redundancy and kind of points of failure. So this is really the simplest way to get energy storage. We've got some ESS solutions. The Express, this one's a bit interesting. If you're a homeowner, this makes a lot more sense. Most installers won't be messing around with these. They are NEMA 3R rated. They have a DC quick connect inlet for charging from PV and being able to actually disconnect and move away. AC inlet for charging from the grid. 4 outlets and 2 USB ports. These are direct, so you can actually pull. You can see them right here. You can pull power directly off this unit. So the idea kind of being, you charge this up as a customer, you stow it away, maybe in the garage or wherever you're going, or even I've seen it used in some projects with, I think, the Red Cross or Direct Relief, maybe, where they can move them on site. But really the idea is they charge up, they hold that charge really nicely because lithium iron phosphate has very low self-discharge. So it definitely can hold that charge really well. And then you just start plugging things in. No need to hardwire directly into the panel. When the grid goes down, you can literally plug things in, plug a power strip in, power loads. I've seen people use these in apartments where they can't mess around with the panel, but they live in a big apartment. It's where they live permanently, and it makes a lot of sense. The more popular ESS solution is our Access unit. This comes in 2 different kinds. It comes in either the Solarc Access, which is just using Solarc components, or the Schneider Access using Schneider components. This is an all-in-one: batteries, inverter, charger, everything built into a NEMA 3R enclosure. They can be DC or AC coupled. So this could be for new or existing PV, can even be off-grid if you want. They are warranted for off-grid. And everything's just ready to go. Programming wise, it is pre-programmed. Sometimes you'll mess around with a little bit of programming depending on customer preference. But for the most part, all of that's done. And a lot of the hard wiring is done for you as well. And our newest addition to the SimpliPhi family here is the AmpliPHI battery. So this is the same nameplate capacity, that 3.8 as the standard Phi battery. It does have a little bit of a higher discharge. The Phi does 80 amps of DC for 10 minutes, where the AmpliPHI does 100 amps of DC for 10 minutes. The big difference is that it has closed loop communications. So you can see the ports here actually where we are running cables out to the inverter and from battery to battery, so it can communicate and actually perform closed loop communications. Dimensions, and I'll talk a little bit on the next slide about what that really means, but dimensions and weights to mention as well. They're the same dimensions as the standard Phi battery. Weight's a little bit heavier, but still pretty light in battery terms, at least at 86 pounds. So it fits in our existing ESS cabinets and our wall brackets. So again, it has that direct communication. I think we're just finalizing up on SMA and a couple others, but right now we have it communicating with the SolarArc. That's the approved list right now. It allows for auto-populated set points. And this is, again, the battery is what's communicating to the inverter and actually telling it, hey, these are my set points. This is my size of my battery bank. This is my state of charge, my voltage. Here's what to do. So it kind of takes over as the brain of the operation. So as an installer, the benefit here is, you plug it up to your inverter and it basically functions the way it's supposed to right out of that gate. So it also has a higher level of protection because of that. It is limited right now to 40 batteries in parallel, which is still quite a bit still. Definitely on a residential scale, you're never going to really touch that unless it's some off-grid or net zero type project. And it does have flexible sizing. So for those that are familiar, with our standard Phi battery, we've got some sizing requirements as far as minimum battery to inverter. If you're hooking this up to a SolarArc, there is no size requirement. So you can have one of these on the 12 kilowatt SolarArc. It will stifle things like, if you've got a big PV array and the grid goes down, you won't be able to use that entire thing, but it is okay to use less batteries than inverter when using the AmpliPHI battery. Okay, so let's kind of kick this off by talking about adding storage to a grid-tied PV system. Just some kind of key definitions here. AC coupling, if you're looking to dive deeper into these kind of things like AC and DC coupling, I actually have a whole nother presentation, NAPCEP certified, where we go over those different topics. But for this, just a basic definition will do. AC coupling, we're just referring to PV power is immediately inverted to AC power before reaching loads or the battery-based inverter. From there, power can either go directly to loads or the grid if it's selling as AC power, or can be converted back to DC to charge the batteries. AC coupling, is pretty common, really common these days when we're talking about retrofits. So the idea that you can actually add in a battery system without kind of redoing everything. And when the grid goes down, not only can you run your batteries to your critical loads panel, but you can actually run your solar while the grid is down again. DC coupling, still my favorite. I like DC coupling if you can. I know it makes sense a lot of time for retrofits, but it is definitely a smooth way to work a battery system. And we're talking about DC power just coming from that PV array with charging regulations. So typically through like a charge controller in order to charge a battery bank before ever even being inverted to AC power. This could be grid tied too, though. I think that's a common misconception that DC is really only off grid. There's huge benefits. We'll talk about that when it comes to going grid tied on a DC coupled system. And I think the big thing to consider is when it comes to retrofits, it doesn't make a ton of sense. But when it comes to a brand new system, it makes a little more sense. Critical loads panel, I know that's maybe people call it something else, sub panel, critical loads. backup panel is just an additional AC panel added to a home that contains loads deemed critical that can not only be powered during normal operation, but also during a grid outage. And lastly, frequency shifting. I might mention this, but it's good to just put it out there. If we mention that, we're just talking about the mechanism used by the battery-based inverter in the AC coupled situation, so up here, to actually curtail and operate the PV production during a grid outage. Okay, so let's talk about adding storage to a grid-tied PV system. So let's call this a retrofit as the easiest way to kind of sum that up. We offer a few different solutions here that can be utilized in this scenario. Some installers may choose to purchase the batteries and inverter not as an all-in-one unit. You know, if you've been doing this for a while, I think it's the way to go. A lot of the time, you might end up with a really kind of, you can kind of play around a little bit more when you do this. When you know how to put the parts and pieces together yourself, you can definitely help a customer out a little bit more on specific sizing that they might require. And there's no one size fits all. So again, this allows for greater flexibility regarding sizing and what loads can actually be backed up on the home, which, when we get into these discussions later about whole home backup, the access solution, which we're about to go into, the ESS that we offer, energy storage solution, does not make as much sense, I think, for a whole home backup. This is more of, it's while you can add storage to these access solutions, it's definitely not as customizable as if you were to put, parts and pieces together yourself. That being said, it is the easier solution in the end when just trying to get a customer storage with certain expectations. So we do offer the ESS. This can cut down greatly on installation time. It's definitely a great choice for installers that are maybe just getting started in storage. Maybe you've done a lot of grid-tied PV. Now you want to move towards storage. This is a great solution for that. Something I'm going to mention, actually, I'm going to just say it now, and then I'm going to mention it later down when we talk about time of use. But something that I just always got to throw out there, and it's kind of even out of place in this slide, but it's important to understand that time of use, which is a big application I see people sell grid-tied PV with battery backup on, is not very efficient when it comes to AC coupling. You can do it with the solar access. It can do AC coupling and time of use, but really DC coupling is the way to go if you're talking about time of use. So ignore that, maybe ignore that comment just for a little bit. It's a little out of place here, but we will come back to it as we talk about TOU, time of use rates, later. Okay, let's talk about sizing for critical loads. I think this is so important to think about. I think this is often overlooked when it comes to, what are you trying to, what is the customer trying to achieve? It's just so crucial that you convey the correct appliances or that the customer conveys the correct appliances and backup loads, so that you know what you're doing. Often the customer really will adjust based on budget, but you want to make sure that you understand that going into it. I can't tell you how many customers I hear from that, were sold a system saying this will back up your entire home, no critical loads or no load calculations ran or anything like that. It's just not good practice. We really want to make sure, there's tons of different sources out there to aid in load calculations. One of my favorite, the Alti store, has a great tool on their website that is a really good one for calculating loads. It does all the hard work for you. You just got to type in a bunch of stuff and you're good to go. But it's super crucial that you kind of set those expectations for the customer. We've got some tools as well. And the tools are not necessarily related to backup or to calculating the loads themselves. But once you have that load number, we have some really great tools that can spit out, hey, this is how many batteries you need, whether that's our standard PHI calculator or a more advanced calculator that goes into system considerations as well. The standard one just really kind of goes through the easy stuff, which is just, this tool factors in kilowatt hours per day, days of autonomy that the customer wants, and we'll just give you that quantity of PHI products, whether it's, AmpliPHI or the SimpliPhi, just the standard PHI batteries, it'll spit out that quantity. The more advanced calculator we have on our website goes a little bit more into the nitty gritty. It's really important when using the access, as I mentioned. It's kind of a no one size fits all situation, and when it comes to backup power and homeowners and their expectations. So if you're going to be selling access solutions, I would just make sure to say, hey, here's your kilowatt hours that you have, and here's the expectations based on what you plan to use. And oftentimes you'll find that a little education goes a long way with customers, and even just expressing maybe they don't want that hot tub, as Matt Walker, our other trainer, has on his system soon enough here. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to have the hot tub on the critical loads. Okay, so the most basic drawing there could be, but just an idea of it's not this simple. I'm going to say that right now, but this is the general idea behind it. You've got your PV going into your microinverters. Maybe they're either in a combiner or there already is a sub panel put in. Let's call this the sub panel right here, out to the main panel and out to the grid. So everything's just selling right out. With our access unit, you're basically just putting the access in between the critical and the main. Now, when the grid goes down, we disconnect from the main and we only power what's on the critical, as well as frequency shift to bring the PV back online. So we can now charge the batteries from the solar, as well as cover loads on that critical loads panel. We're talking in this case about not an access solution, but we're just talking maybe an installer that kind of knows what they're doing and likes to maybe put the parts and pieces together themselves. In this case, they're just using our cabinets, let's say, with a big giant system. For example, there's 24 batteries here and the inverter just here. But again, same kind of idea. The access just puts it all into one nice cabinet, wired up and ready to go. Okay. Let's talk about adding storage and PV. And what I mean by that is adding storage and PV at the same time is a bit different. And I'm not just talking about off grid. I'm talking about, let's say, a grid tied customer comes to you and is interested in getting PV and battery system all at once. Now, I'm going to preach a little bit here on my own accord and just say that I really think that that's a great opportunity to push a customer towards a DC coupled solution. Why does that make sense? What does that really allow for? Well, first of all, it allows for better utilization, as I mentioned, of features like time of use, peak load shaving, the charging from the charge controller versus the AC coupling and the converting back to DC provides a greater efficiency and more dynamic use of the PV system, frankly. With MPPT, maximum power point tracking, we just see a better battery or a better battery charge. Charging is also not interrupted when the grid goes down. That's so crucial when it comes to going DC coupled. So the grid kicks. Well, the good news is that PV is not even connected to the AC really. It's just, it's just on the DC side of everything. It doesn't even really notice that the grid went down. The inverter might say, hey, I need a little bit less because the loads are changed. But other than that, charging is pretty flawless there. I mean, if you're in California, for instance, and you've got an AC coupled system, and probably actually, I'm going to hold my tongue here because most likely probably DC coupled too. But, when the grid goes down, you have to wait 5 minutes before the PV can even turn back on. Again, misconceptions about off-grid only with AC or DC coupled. Just like AC coupled, a DC coupled system can sell flawlessly right back to the grid. Any excess PV will go right out. Self-consumption can really be utilized a lot more seamlessly, even when the grid is still present when you have a DC coupled system. So you have the ability a lot easier to self-consume your battery. And if you're putting together a battery and solar on a system, and you can prove that at least 75% of its charged from renewables, which is pretty easy to prove. I don't know the exact logistics. You can apply the ITC credit towards both the PV and the battery side of the system. So that's kind of, it's not a guarantee every time, but depending on how the math works out, you can apply for that ITC on the battery as well if everything's going in at the same time. Okay, so looking at this DC coupled system, I just want to first point out these are not microinverters. This is rapid shutdown components. This as well. This is just rapid shutdown initiators right here, the button, and these are just the components that hook to the panel. These are Tigos specifically right here in this picture. And I just put them in because it isn't, it's where if we're talking about grid tied systems, for the most part, you will likely have these panels on a roof and you will likely need modular level shutdown. So DC coupled with the access, basically we're just going DC right into the access where the charge controller is and charging the batteries before being inverted to the critical loads and the main loads and out to the grid. Grid goes down. Again, charging is not even really interrupted. We can disconnect from just the main loads panel and we can still power the AC out here where we are covering critical loads. PV continues to operate. If we were to expand that a little bit, talk about putting parts and pieces together, you can see here, here's the Solarc, which actually has a charge controller built into it. So it's going into the Solarc, into the MPPT, here's the DC bus. And really this would more likely hit right here. I think this picture is just a little bit off, but more than likely this would hit here and then this would have one connection to the inverter. But basically you're charging all these batteries. And again, you can disconnect from the grid, you can sell to the grid, and you can also cover your critical loads either in real time when the grid's up or when the grid's down. Okay, so these were provided by Lumen. They provided us with some slides. We're doing a lot of stuff with Lumen, standby. I don't have all the information, but with smart panels really becoming more and more common, I think it really ties together with what makes a smart panel make sense in these backup situations. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Lumen. I might be able to answer some questions, not all questions about them. It's not my product. And I am still familiarizing myself with this, but I truly do think, if you're looking at other companies, even a lot of integration with smart panels right now, it's becoming a really common thing when it comes to residential systems and backup. So we're talking about data-driven algorithms powering smart responsive control of energy usage. So you can control real-time data on energy consumptions, or you can control and see real-time data on energy consumption at a circuit level. So per load, really, or per circuit, I should say, not per load. And they are UL. And you can add this onto an existing distribution panel, which is really nice. So, and we'll talk about whole home backup, but the point being, if you are looking to get into that whole home backup type scenario and the critical or the main loads panel is already there, this can help out. So it includes the grid voltage detection and a single set of 200 amp current transformers. This is automated control of energy and consumption based on preferences. And this could be customer or how the installer sets it up, and microgrid status and habits. So just to look at the facets of a smart panel, you got your grid service, your energy storage, your power control systems, the smart home, your energy, your dynamic energy pricing, which again, these are things that this can help out with, home energy assistant, and the appliance health. So let's kind of dive in so looking at this, and I'll kind of bring this full circle here in a little bit of why it makes so much sense for these backup systems is, your typical ESS system, you might be able to just say, hey, these are the loads that I want to protect. These are my backup loads. This is, I can handle lights, fridge, and maybe a miscellaneous plug or whatnot because I have that much battery. I don't want to hook up my water heater or my HVAC system because it's going to just drain too much. You can do that when it comes to using a smart panel like the Lumen. You can hook up these higher demand loads and your smart panel can make decisions based on preference, when to use those loads and when not to. And you can even turn the loads off. I mean, it's just a huge benefit for that kind of stuff. Instead of having to, let me actually go back. So instead of having to pick and choose from these loads as a hardwired situation. So, you wire in, hey, I want lights, fridge, and this plug. You have to move those over to that critical loads panel. When you're using the smart panels, you don't have to decide. The customer can really decide in real time, which is what's so important to me about these smart panels. Is a customer can say, I don't want to choose right now if I want to be able to use my HVAC, or maybe maybe they've got a big heater and maybe the power goes out and it's really cold outside, and they say, we just need 10 minutes of heat. If the heat's not on the critical loads panel, they're kind of, SOL. And if they're using a smart panel, much different story. They have the ability to turn on that load and also turn off that load based on, the conditions that they're facing and where the battery's at, maybe even where solar's at. If you have excess solar coming through all of a sudden, it's the middle of the day, but your power's still out, you can say, hey, I want to turn on more loads. And you can even program it to think smart like that and actually make those decisions. So you can definitely work a little bit more with what you have available. So we've got systems integrated. I know this picture's a little fuzzy, did the best we could, but it's great to see customer photos. This is actually an access solution with a smart panel put in place. So all residential ESS have limited capacity. We're talking gas in the tank or kilowatt hours. That would be your storage. Responsive load control allows you to stay within the kilowatt hour limits and not prematurely deplete the ESS. So again, you can make these smart control functions and actually decide what makes sense. So example, without Lumen, your battery can be drained by your, let's say, EV or your AC unit maybe before you even wake up. And we can make those decisions with the smart panel and really make sure that somebody has the ability to not drain their battery and make the smarter decisions. All residential ESS has a max power output limitation. This helps us with that as well. Load governance allows you to stay below demand limits and avoid a protected loads panel. So again, we can actually do whole home backup here by going with a smart panel and mixing that with one of our ESS solutions. We have that ability to cover more loads, even if it's just a smaller access. Maybe it's our 6 battery access, which is our larger access solution. We have the ability now to I'm going to go back to choose all of these loads being on there and then turn them off as we see fit or move things around without actually having to put a sub panel in and move loads physically over. So it enables whole home backup without the associated expense. I don't know if anyone's ever done a whole home backup without a smart panel, but not a fun situation. It takes a lot of work, a lot of weird programming. It never seems to work as well as one thinks. An ATS might work, big ATS, but those are just tricky and at this point expensive most of the time for a whole home backup. And then, okay, maybe you might hear, well, why don't I just move all my loads over to the critical loads panel? That's how I do the whole home backup. Well, again, if you're going with a smaller solution, so let's say you only have, 4 batteries, you're going to run out of juice really quick in that battery. This allows you to, again, limit the loads, basically to create your own profile, as I see it, on a critical loads panel without having to put a critical loads panel in there, and it's interchangeable. So it allows for expandable energy storage systems, 24/7 load governance and monitoring in an outage, flexibility and interchangeability of which loads to back up. That's what's so important to me. Protects the battery as well from premature depletion, protects the ESS inverter from tripping, so maybe too much power being pulled, and really does extend your battery life. It's not a guarantee, you need to set it up correctly, but if you set it up in a manner that is light on the battery, you can see longer lifespan. So a little bit of contact information. If you want to reach out to Lumen, I would do it direct. You can see John's email there, Director, Applications Engineering. You can see his email. Price, I did ask them just to throw in price. They were kind enough to actually do it. So you can see here the $19.50 per the unit plus shipping and a volume discount of 5 units. If you're looking to get more information on them, check out their installer training as well, hosted weekly on Thursdays at 11 a.m. Eastern time and 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So again, the reason I bring it up and why it's so important to me is we really are looking towards this as a really viable solution to be a little bit more dynamic when it comes to grid tied backup, and looking at how we can utilize the main loads panel and not kind of stifle customers to just critical loads. Actually giving them the ability to really kind of pick and choose, as well as just benefit the overall system health as well. A little bit about adding storage and PV. If you're an installer, I know you probably already know this, but often you'll find a huge backlog of previous customers that currently have PV only. They're great opportunities to reach out and really investigate, hey, do we want to add a battery to the system? I see so much of it lately of installers that are really putting the legwork in to go back to all these customers, see if they want to add storage, and look at these easier solutions, like going with a smart panel or going with the access with the critical loads panel and just adding it in pretty quickly. Residential backup continues to rise in demand. Retrofit is one of the main sectors of this growth. Looking at failing infrastructure too is important, and the financial return through time of use, rising utility rates, peak load shaving, all these different types of rates that are going to continue to affect customers, and locking in that kind of, hey, this is how much I'd like to pay for my energy storage, and allow me to not be subject to these rising rates. So again, talking about application wise, I think I already gone through these, but look at these as one of the main drivers of residential backup: peak load shaving, time of use, and integrated solar plus storage as a whole. So I would call that resiliency on the last one. Looking at a lot of customers find this really important that they have that backup available. Maybe it has to do with just wanting to make sure they're safe in a power outage situation, or maybe it's something more, like they have a medical device that needs to be powered, something along those lines. Time of use, if you're not familiar with it, you likely will soon enough, as it's definitely spreading throughout the country. The idea of electric company can charge you more at peak times versus non-peak times. And I'm not talking about a little bit more. Sometimes it's a lot more. Adding a battery, and definitely adding a battery with solar, we can cut that out pretty effectively. Peak load shaving, not super big on the residential scale yet, but definitely on a commercial scale, the idea that if you use too much power, everything over that threshold will also be charged more. Again, battery systems can definitely mitigate this. All right, I'm going to wrap this up with a little bit about financing, or as I'll give Matt credit where Matt's credit is due, finance your battery. I know, zing. I hope Matt's watching. It's a great one there. But looking at the options that we really support. So lithium batteries do have a higher upfront cost, yet better ROI, return on investment, than lead acid batteries. And honestly, even comparing certain lithiums to other lithiums, you'll find that the lifespan makes a big difference when it comes to ROI. Financing will allow more customers to begin with a system that is properly sized. And what I mean by that is, with our standard PHI battery, oftentimes a customer might not have the funds to go properly sized. They might see damage from that battery because they didn't size the minimum quantity to the inverter. This allows them to start right and make sure that they don't fall into the trap of a poorly sized system and possibly even damage the battery. Don't make your customers choose between new windows and doors or new batteries. We're talking increase the bid size by taking on more projects. Financing is not limited to just solar. Batteries are able to be financed, and they can still even take advantage of some of the tax incentives as well. So the kind of three that we're going to talk about really quickly: Mosaic. I'm sure most people are familiar with Mosaic at this point. If you're looking to finance our batteries through them, with the Power Switch Zero, so this is zero payments for 12 to 18 months, then your payments start. The Power Switch Choice, which actually gives you the choice to take advantage of the federal tax credit or not. And the Power Switch Plus for solar and or energy storage, plus other home improvements at the same time. So bundling everything together. LoanPal, if you're looking at LoanPal and just using it, we're talking about easy to use POS app to compare different loan options and make the sale virtually or face-to-face. So as an installer, it's a great tool. This is really the one that I typically recommend for contractors to be able to present that to their homeowners. So oftentimes with other financing, you might find that you're just bringing it to the homeowner and saying, hey, you should apply for this financing. This allows you a little bit more as a contractor to actually show these values and bring it to the homeowner yourself. And it's kind of similar here, though. It does allow for contractors to offer financing on a huge number of different projects. No prepayment fees, flexible loan terms, instant credit approvals, and it definitely integrates with current sales and operations tools that you might already be using as a contractor or solar and battery installer. So the reason I bring this up, when it comes to residential grid tied, financing can be really key as far as I'm concerned. I mean, who doesn't like, I got to be honest, I finance plenty of stuff in my life, and it's just easier sometimes when you're looking at, the daunting system of, I'd like to get battery backup, but I don't want to spend, $10,000 up front. There are solutions with our batteries that we can provide. So if you want any more information on that, I would just recommend shooting an email over to sales@simpliphipower.com. All right, very last, our IQ installer program. If you're already installing our batteries, I'll skip right over the distributor one. If you're already installing our batteries as an installer, you've done 2 installs already, get qualified. It's not a requirement to install our batteries, but if you're already installing, you can end up on our where to buy page. You can end up in our newsletter. You'll get some swag, and really we'll just highlight projects, deployments. Matt and I even plan to invite some of them on our new podcast to discuss systems and whatnot. You get a lot of visibility both by the customers, other installers, distributors. It's a really good, easy program. It takes literally, I would say, 10 minutes to fill out the application. So again, only if you're already installing our batteries, the minimum requirement's 2 installs already to become qualified for this program. But if you're already doing that and you haven't, I would jump on that right away, because it takes very little time and you'll see a lot of leads coming your way indirectly through the website. So, customer sees you on the website, they're in your area, they're gonna call you and say, hey, I see that you can install these batteries. All right. That is the end of the presentation. Any questions, you can also send to training@simpliphipower.com. I'm going to open the Q&A, see what questions we have on there, and try to get through them. Okay, when using in an off-grid mode in an unsecure area, are there security measures in the cabinet to prevent unauthorized entry and or theft of said equipment? Physical security members, it does lock. It is a locking unit, so you can lock the unit. As far as talking about the, I guess, cloud-based stuff and software security, really that's going to come from the Schneider or the Solark if you're using one of our all-on-one units, which does definitely have some level of protection built into it when you're talking about like the cloud-based services. And to be frank, most of those services don't even allow for unlocalized changes to the system. So can you do whole home backup with Lumen if you have microinverters on the modules? Yeah, absolutely. And we're talking retrofit. You can absolutely do that whole home backup. And it even has different, again, I'm not 100% the expert here on their stuff, but I would ask them, about it, but they can definitely explain in more detail about some of the PV stuff that it's able to do as well, related to curtailing and ramping up power. If you have a Lumen, would that mean you no longer need a critical loads panel between your AC coupled panels and your inverter? Correct, unless you're using it for a combiner, which some people still use. But if you technically do not need any loads on it or a critical loads panel. And Matt noticed my sweet comment about his financing. Glad to hear it. We've implemented another lithium battery that a customer specifically requested that provides the closed loop communication with Schneider XW Pro. The experience, to be extremely kind, has been frustrating. What has SimpliPhi done to ensure that installers are not burdened with working out the bugs on closed loop communication operating? Well, we're always staying on top of our stuff. Any hiccups that we've had in the beginning, we've worked through, supported our customers. refined. We're also not moving too fast. I think a lot of companies will, try to add as many inverters on as quickly as they can. That's not us. We're going to take our time. Just the Solarc right now, soon to be the SMA, and Schneider soon to follow there. But we take our time because we want to make sure that it's absolutely perfect before moving on. I think a lot of these companies try to open the floodgates and say, hey, we want to, pair with SMA, Outback, Magnum, all these different companies right out of the gate. And that's where they run into a lot of these issues. All right, everybody. Well, it looks like no more questions. So again, if you have anything that comes up, email me at training@simplifypower.com. Happy to answer any questions. If you've got any questions on our IQ program as well, training@simplifypower.com. Thanks everyone for joining, and keep an eye out for our calendar and any upcoming events.